Hello and welcome everybody today to our Listen and Lunch session. It's great to have you with us. My name is Kate Legg and I'm one of the practitioners that works for Dementia Carers Count. I'm an occupational therapist by background, and I'm really excited about being involved in this session today because we're talking about spirituality and dementia, and topic very close to my own heart for personal reasons and just from what I've observed in my professional experience. So we're really keen to open up the discussion. So if anybody has got any questions or any experiences about what they think about spirituality and how it affects people with dementia, would be really glad to hear from you. So please pop any comments into the chat box. I'm joined today by Jane Stanfield, who some of you may recognise. So she's done some sessions with us before with Dementia Carers Count, but she's here today to share her experience. Jane, are you able to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you, Kate. So I'm an associate practitioner with Dementia Carers Count, have been for about 4 years, and I've been working in the area of carer support for over 25 years, mainly in the voluntary sector and regard to information and advice and advocacy for carers, and also carers assessments. But and so I do some online sessions on carers' rights and benefits and other things for Dementia Carers Count. But I think I've been asked to join Kate today because over the last 3 years I've been working as a chaplain in a dementia nursing home. So I've got that view on things as well. So it's lovely to be invited to join you, Kate.
Oh, thank you, Jane. So yeah, so we're talking about spirituality dementia, and it's a really big topic, and there's lots of different elements of it. So we'll try and cover what we can. It's only a half-an-hour session, but we'll try and be as open as we can to cover what we can. But we kind of hope that it's the start of opening up a conversation, and certainly in the future we can talk about it more. And if anybody's got any particular elements that they think, oh, it'd be really interesting to discuss that, then please let us know and we can include it. But just to start us off, Jane, can you kind of describe what spirituality is? I know that's a big question.
Yeah.
What do you think spirituality means?
I would say, to begin with, it's much broader than religion, although people automatically think of religion when they think about spirituality. But as a chaplain, I'm there to support the spiritual needs of all people, of all faiths, or none. And although I have to say my experience is actually with either Christians or atheists, I don't have experience of being a chaplain with people of other faiths, but perhaps there's people on the chat who do, and that would be interesting. But spirituality involves all sorts of things, starting, I think, with our own identities and our sense of self. And obviously that has implications for people with dementia, and also implications for people supporting people with dementia, because we might have to support them because we have the memories, we have the knowledge of who they are, even if they're beginning to forget. It's to do with our relationships with other people and with the outside world, and our feelings about the bigger picture, where we fit in, what might be giving us a sense of purpose. And then it also leads on to the where we're taken beyond ourselves, where we might feel uplifted, connecting with something transcendent is the word. And for some people, that will be through a religious belief and practice, through which the bigger picture leads to a belief in God or other deities. But for others, it can be something else. And I think, Kate, you're going to talk a bit about that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the important thing to kind of highlight is that spirituality is quite broad, and like you say, for some people it is faith related, and it's very much a big part of who they are and their identity. But for other people who don't relate to a specific faith, may find that their spiritual needs are met in other ways. So it could be that when they're interacting with nature, or when they're out in the environment, or it could be particular things. So kind of moving away from that, just assuming that it's one thing, and opening up. But it's about, I think you're right about that kind of connection with something outside of ourselves. So whether that's a God, or whether that's just that feeling that comes from something else. So when we think about then what happens for people with dementia, I think there starts to then become some questions about, well, what does happen for people with dementia? Are they still able to to meet those needs. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Jane.
Well, I think failing memories, we want to support them in all sorts of ways, but particularly with spiritual needs, when the memories are to do with either a religious faith and practice or someone's own self and memories of who they are and what they've done in life and what sort of people they are. I think it's really important to try and support people with those memories, with prompts, with you know, if it's religious practice, then there are quite a lot of things like symbols and very familiar prayers and hymns that we can help with. If it's about somebody's sense of self and identity, there are all sorts of prompts we can use in terms of photos and memories. But ultimately, I would say that supporting someone's spiritual needs in terms of their identity sometimes means we know who they are, even if they are feeling lost and not quite sure who they are, and we sort of hold their memories for them if we can.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the dementia, I think quite often what happens is when you know, during our lives we kind of almost create situations, don't we, or practices or things that we do, or the way that we manage things, which I would describe as things that you've kind of learned or have got thinking behind it, or structure or routine. And sometimes what happens with people develop a dementia is that they're not able to maintain those things in the same way as they maybe used to. So they may have gone to a particular place for prayer or worship, or to do a particular activity, and they may not, or they may have read particular things or knew particular things, and they may not be able to do those in the same way. So sometimes there's this assumption that that means they're not still connecting spiritually. And I think from my experience, just of what I've seen in my career as an occupational therapist, but also just in personal life, my experience is that people are still able to, but in a different way. So sometimes a bit more in touch emotionally with what's happening. So they might not follow the same practices, but that doesn't mean they're not able to connect. And I think from my experience, what we've tried to do, or the work that I've done before, is about trying to enable people to still connect. So it may be in a different way, or it may not be in the way that they did before, but are there things that they can still connect with? So like you said about symbols, or, you know, particular music, or particular prayers, or particular activities, are there things that you can adapt so that they can still make that connection? And that kind of links, so we've had a comment from somebody that said, my husband and I used to go to church every Sunday, but it's rare that we go these days since his condition has deteriorated. I try to stay in touch with the group, but even that is becoming increasingly difficult. So yeah, any thoughts about that, Jane?
It's difficult, isn't it? I wonder what is difficult, whether it's worry about what other people might think, or whether it's the difficulty of the person themselves in engaging and knowing what's happening. And I think both of those things, there are things to try. Certainly talking with the worshipping group, whatever it is, a congregation or a house group or whatever it is, maybe offering to talk, have a session on dementia and how it affects people, and looking at how their practice can be made more dementia friendly, dementia inclusive, and just being aware makes people more relaxed. We had a gentleman who came to church who had dementia and would whistle the whole way through the service, and the congregation knew and understood why, and supported him and his wife very well, and they didn't mind that he was whistling. You know, they were glad he was there worshipping, but it needed a little bit of understanding to be able to do that. So it's talking with people. If perhaps the big service, in this case it's somebody who's going to church, isn't it? So if that's just too overwhelming, maybe too many people, too much sensory overload perhaps for somebody, you might want to look at having a smaller group, or maybe asking the minister to do a home communion or something, which will be familiar with the person, but it wouldn't be so overwhelming. You could try different things. That there are actually, Kate, I've discovered there are a lot of resources for making dementia friendly, dementia inclusive churches. I've got one here, but because I knew about the one that I've been using, but
oh, okay.
if you Google dementia friendly worship or dementia friendly churches, there's a lot of resources, and perhaps it's a chance to start that dialogue with people and say, look, can we make our church more inclusive so that we can carry on coming?
Yeah, that's really interesting point. So I think a couple of things I picked up from that is, one is about can the environment be adapted, or can people understand a bit better in the environment that somebody's going into? So whatever environment that is, whatever place that person goes to, are there changes that can be made there to accommodate the person? And can there be some discussion around that? And then some of the other things about thinking about whether that's still the best place for that person to go. So it may be that there comes a point when actually taking them into that traditional place that they used to go might not be the right thing for them, because it might be too overstimulating. It may be that it's physically too demanding on them, or it doesn't meet their needs anymore. And if that's the case, looking at how their spiritual needs can be met maybe in a different way. So some of those things you suggested were great. And I think the other thing I picked up from that comment, and also from somebody else that's made a comment about not being able to go to church anymore or going to these sessions, is as a carer, remembering that you have spiritual needs as well. And so sometimes if the person that you maybe used to go with, you're not going with anymore, that you then stop going yourself as well, or you maybe don't do the things that you were doing as well. And just an encouragement really to try and maintain that for yourself, because meeting those spiritual and emotional needs for everybody is really important. And you might get very sidetracked into looking after the person that you're caring for, and forgetting about yourself. So if you can still have your practices as well, then that's really important. So I'm slightly distracted by somebody coming in.
That should be an important part of a carer's assessment, looking at your spiritual needs as well as all your other needs, and how they can be provided for.
Yeah. So just thinking a bit more about the person. So when I've worked with people, and certainly as people maybe have progressed further down the dementia path, and maybe not been as well, maybe not able to communicate in the same way, I'm just thinking about some of the things that we've tried to do in order to maintain that connection. So we kind of think about, if you're meeting with somebody spiritually, or you're working with people's emotional needs, it's about having a connection. So it's not necessarily always about doing a particular task, it's just about connecting, and some of the ways that you've been able to do that. So I don't know if you've got any examples.
You mean in worship or
anything like that? Yeah, because the one that springs to mind for me is music.
Oh yeah.
But that doesn't always have to be spiritual music, does it? It could be music generally.
It doesn't, but it can unlock all sorts of feelings. We did have I lead worship sessions in the home I work in, and there was one gentleman who's atheist, and we had a mutually respectful and bantering relationship, which we both enjoyed, I hope. And I would ask him, would he mind if we did something here, or would you like? And he said, no, I'm going to stay. Although he didn't get, he said it's all rubbish, but I'm going to stay. But I did play a piece of music, classical music, at the end of the service when we'd finished, and we suddenly looked around, and he was in absolute floods of tears. We went over, and he said, no, it's just the music. It was beautiful, and it had transported him somewhere in a very real way, an emotional way. And I think that was meeting his spiritual needs very much. It's a good example of how music can unlock things and really
I found that as well. And I think again, I admit that a lot of my experience is working with a generation of people that maybe very traditionally went to schools where they sang Christian songs in schools, and particular things. So that the well-known ones, All Things Bright and Beautiful, I think we probably sang every week. But there was certainly a generation of people who went through that kind of schooling with those very traditional songs, and learned them, whether they had a faith or not. They learned them. And so often when you're playing music or having music with people that is very familiar, so it could be from any backgrounds, music that's familiar kind of almost unlocks different memories, doesn't it? And so we, for quite a few years, used to go to a small chapel and do a chapel service and play very familiar songs. So like I said, I think I sang All Things Bright and Beautiful every week for quite a few weeks. It's got a lot of verses. But for a lot of people who it reminded them of when they were at school, and it kind of really sort of brought them, you know, people could quite often come to those sessions, be quite sleepy or tired or withdrawn, not really interacting. And then as soon as we played those familiar songs, would, you know, really brighten up and engage with it. And so that's connected. That's back to that thing about that's connecting, isn't it? It's promoting memories, and it's kind of like emotionally linking up. And similar for very well-known sometimes prayers, or if there's particular passages or there's particular readings or there's particular things that people might have done, that as soon as you start doing those, people kind of, it triggers into a different part of their memory and emotions, and kind of brings them out of themselves. And actually we've got a couple of comments from people saying similar things. Somebody said, we have a couple of members from the church choir visit us most weeks and they sing with my mum and I. It's not the same as going to church, but she does really enjoy it. And then my dad rarely remembers what he did 20 minutes ago, but he'll recognise a Frank Sinatra song in seconds. Yeah, brilliant. So that's the sort of thing we're talking about. Yeah.
And it enables people to feel they're participating as well. If they can even grab a few words and a bit of the tune of something, or join in as a bit of the Lord's Prayer, it's involving and participatory in whatever level that someone can do that. So
yeah, so that participation, again, I think thinking about other ceremonies or festivals that people are used to, or family things. So we quite often get asked questions about, so say, for example, if it was traditional to have like a big meal or a big family meal around a particular festival, you know, should you still include somebody with dementia? Are they going to be able to cope with it? And it's kind of one of those things where it's a bit play it by ear, really, and trialing it out, because you have to be aware that sometimes these situations do become too much, and they might be too loud or too noisy or too much going on. And so thinking for the person you're caring for, is it, do they go to that ceremony, or do you do something slightly smaller, or is it that actually they can be there and just be experiencing it? So not so much pressure to sort of participate, but that doesn't mean they can't be part of what's going on, and listening to the familiar songs, or listening to conversations that are going on, or being part of rituals. Are there particular you know, costumes or pieces of jewelry, or particular things that happen, that even if somebody can't participate, they might just be with it and experiencing it, so that they're still feeling all of that.
And we're coming up to Diwali, aren't we? And the lights will, you know, just, and candles generally are things that trigger memories and make people feel that they're involved. And so
thinking about, so in terms of the spirituality thing, again, about for individuals, what things do people do in order to feel connected, and can you still do those? So if there are people who really felt connected in terms of things like accessing nature, or getting out and about in the countryside, or just exploring the world, again, trying to think about how you can adapt those activities to still kind of get that same sense of feeling for people, and adapting.
Yeah, and I think it is about emotions, isn't it? Because emotions last beyond cognition, really, and you can still feel, even if you can't process what you're thinking, and you feel these feelings of comfort and familiarity and spiritual fulfillment and participation.
And it doesn't have to be for long, does it? Because actually sometimes you can experience these things for a few minutes, but that's just as important. Just got another a comment saying, I don't feel part of a community anymore. I've got little support, and my husband refuses to attend church anymore. It used to be such an important part of our lives. And I think, I mean, my thoughts for that are about, it's really important to try and access that community. And I appreciate sometimes you slip out of routine, if your husband's not going anymore, it's you maybe not as well, and quite often people got out of routine over COVID, where people stopped going out to things, but trying to reach out maybe to things that are local to you, or even things online, if that's easier, just to try and build that back up again. Maybe you got any thoughts on that, Jane?
Yeah, I mean, really, you know, it's a shame that the community isn't reaching out the other way, but people do need encouragement. People feel unsure as to how to welcome people who might have dementia, I suppose, and you know, naturally, sort of, if they're not informed, if they're not aware, it is difficult for them. So, but they might welcome some information and some suggestions, and it's hard to put that on the carer to have to do that. But you know, just a dialogue maybe, and maybe, yes, you know, doing it the small way. If there's things like pastoral visitors who might come out on a one-to-one, or smaller groups.
Yes, I think the second part of that comment is, I agree, being part of the community is so important. When it is too difficult, we try and recreate as many rituals as we can at home. And I think you're right. I think some of it is about you accessing support, but some of it is about the people that maybe you're offering the support being a bit unsure about what to offer and how to manage the situation. And so some sort of greater understanding of maybe what somebody with dementia is experiencing, or what you're experiencing as a carer, might help that dialogue. And like I said, there are resources out there that potentially could support with that, but just being open to the discussion, because it's also sometimes about sharing that you're struggling, because that's quite hard. It's sometimes there's quite a lot of stigma attached to caring for somebody with dementia or having a dementia, and having some discussion about what's happening and accepting support is quite hard. I don't know if anybody else has got any other experiences they want to share. Feel free to continue putting them into the chat. Just while we're waiting, I'm just going to pick up on a point that you said at the beginning, Jane, which was about a little bit about identity and who you are. And I think you've mentioned something about sometimes when people have dementia or care for somebody with dementia, they feel that they lose that identity a little bit. And you were saying something a bit about memories and holding memories. I don't know if you can expand on that a bit more.
Yeah, I think it's the way we can look at supporting that need for identity, for feeling that, for someone knowing who they are, or being who they are, because they don't stop being who they are, but they might not be able to express it or even understand it. But it's the people around you who know your history, who've gone through all sorts of things with you. They know who you are, and they can help you touch base with that again, through photos, through talking. Even if there isn't much coming back, it's your I suppose it's respecting the identity, the person who is still there, and holding their memories for them. I think it's a difficult thing to do, but it could be quite a lovely thing to do for someone as well.
Yeah, thank you. We've just had a comment from Joe about any thoughts about a retired minister of religion with dementia.
Well, in some ways, we always say when you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. If you've met one retired minister with dementia, you've met one retired minister with dementia. But I think depending on the person, we've got somebody who will do the reading in our services, or perhaps a smaller thing like a blessing, or just a tiny part of a prayer, trying to find things that person, who I'm sure has contributed so much to worship and pastoral care, finding things that might still be he might still be, or she might still be able to do. And again, it's respecting that person and everything that they have contributed, and recognizing them and enabling them to carry on expressing their ministry if they can.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's back to that thing about individuals and connecting and finding what works for them. And so it may be that they can't do some of the things that they used to do, but are there still ways that that they can still connect? And so somebody's put, my dad can no longer go to church, but his faith is still huge. We see it in flashes, and it's when he's at his happiest. So that's brilliant. Thank you. That's kind of what we're saying about trying to find those moments and those times when you are still connecting. And that definitely leads me to believe that even people who seem to not be able to do things day to day are actually, that kind of emotional and spiritual and soul thing is still there, and it doesn't go, and it's just the opportunities for it to come out. And it may be only just like little short periods of time, it may be 2 or 3 minutes at a time, but it doesn't go, from what I've seen. I mean, people may have different views, but that's what I've seen. And certainly I've worked with people who have been quite unwell with their dementia and almost towards the end of their journey, but yet there's definitely been times of connection, and that kind of gives hope.
Still teaching us something.
Yeah, definitely. And that brings hope, and hope is one of those great things about spirituality and emotional stuff, isn't it? It's about actually that there is still hope. So sorry, we've whizzed through the time, Jane. We've only got a couple of minutes left. Have you got any last thoughts?
I'm really glad that Dementia Carers Count's support for carers is so holistic, and I think this is a really important topic, and perhaps there'll be more discussions about it, and depending on what response we get in terms of questions and things. So
yeah, brilliant, thank you. And definitely, that message, we've obviously only covered one aspect of it today, but if anybody feels that they want to share more, or that they've got particular experiences they want to talk to us about, that maybe we can do future sessions on them, please do get in touch, either on our information email or support email, because we'd love to continue this conversation, and certainly just generally about making sure that the stuff that we offer covers a more diverse range of people and experiences. So thank you very much for that. In terms of our sessions coming up, then please do look on our website for some of the other topics that we offer and some of the other support that we offer. Next week at the same time, same place, we have our next Lunch and Listen, and that is with Deb Bunt and Peter Berry, who are sharing their experiences of living with early onset dementia and the impact that's had on them and their friendship. So come along to that. That will be absolutely brilliant. And if you have any further questions or comments, then either just add them to the comments list or email us, and we'll continue the conversation. So thank you very much, Jane, and thank you for everybody that has sent in their messages.